Visions of the Black Heaven, Chapter 20. Walking into the Louisville, Kentucky airport, Hans heard the din of conversations, clicking footsteps, luggage rolling on the floors. Yet, over all the noise, he was aware of his mantra, the mantra everyone hears, the mantra of the past, the mantra of the present, and the mantra of the future. Everywhere he looked, he saw the shadows dancing in the corners of his eyes. He felt the shadows standing behind the walls. He knew the shadows were hiding in shadows, waiting for their chance to show themselves when the light gave way to the darkness. Walking to the baggage claim, he noticed a short, squat figure dressed in a long black wool overcoat and an out-of-style business suit. The figure was neither walking nor running, but lumbering forward in a continuous, clumsy fall. He had seen this person before. The dark figure holding a cylinder under one arm, retrieving an old-style canvas suitcase off the luggage conveyor. Their eyes locked as he stood up. The sound of his voice, his accent, the urgency of his actions, and his persistence echoed through his mind. I must have these. Name your price. I must have these. Name your price. They stood up, looking at each other in silent recognition. Voltairean Koltek said, Follow me. I have something to show you. At an unoccupied corner of the airport cafe, Voltairean opened a large cylinder used to carry blueprints. Hans watched as the neatly bound package slid out and unrolled to a specific spot. In a thick accent, Voltairean said, Remind you of anything? On the scroll was a drawing of a medallion. His medallion. The faces came alive as Hans gazed upon the exacting detail of the image. In Hans's mind, the words of Shemazes reminded him of the message feeling his need to find whatever it was he was looking for in this desolate, pathetic land that they call America. Looking at the medallion on the scroll, the images came to life, dancing in his mind's eye. Hans looked at Victorian and asked, How did you know where to find me? Voltairean pulled out a newspaper article which Hans used to promote his business. The picture showed Hans sitting on his desk, and in the lower left-hand corner of the picture was his glass display of his gold medallions. Hans watched this short, squat man talk. I have researched you and your family. I know all about you. I find your family very interesting and not unusual, but unique. You lost your parents in a car accident at the age of 4. Your grandfather raised you. Your family comes from a long line of wealthy merchants. For the last 20 generations, your family has been merchants, landowners, and some were royalty in the seat of the Italian Parliament. Some records of your ancestors were a little puzzling until I figured it out. In the early 1700s, there were 2 notations. I realized the existence of an identical twin brother. One son went on with the family tradition. He became a Knights Templar, fulfilling the 4 steps. Excellent, super excellent, Royal Arch, and Knights Templar, and was also a merchant, while the other twin brother became a doctor, moved to Arabia, and studied for 25 years, then moved to England to assist in developing a secret sect movement. From everything I can gather, this twin was instructed in the ancient history of the Din. He was taught at the time of creation. God created the angels first. Then second, the din were created from the smokeless fire. Then God created man. As far as I can tell, your lineage is rich in the Knights Templar tradition of commanding in the Crusades against the Manichaean and the Cathar movements of the Mediterranean European conflicts. We know that, Hans looked at him with a curious, mistrusting eye. You have told me many things, things you should not have known about me. Now, who are you? Voltairion was staring off into the distance, listening carefully to Hans. I know exactly who you are. I have spent years studying your family and your fathers for the past 1,000 years. Because your family is royalty and very powerful, influential, there has been ample records of births, rumored infidelities, payoffs of expectant lovers, births of children. I wrote a family tree of births for 1,000 years. What puzzles me was the days of birth are similar. Each generation, the same birthdays came up over and over again. Then I researched the specific days of conception, and I realized those days are 9 months after pagan holidays, ancient pagan holidays. Another aspect puzzled me. There were dates of children who were born, no names listed. Each of these children had very short lives, except for a favorite child. Then I did research into these children, and a pattern arose. Hans, you are the seventh son of a seventh son. I had to ask myself a question. What does that mean? The number 7 is significant in the world of the occult, mythology, history, and varied other religions. 7 days of creation, Greek mythology, the Palladian of the 7 sisters. Who are you? Hans asked. Voltairion spoke calmly, smoothly, yet confidently. Who I am is of no significance. He looked intently at Hans. My grandfather found many significant ancient artifacts, spearheads, arrowheads, helmets, shields, swords, tools of hand-to-hand combat, the same as what is in your collection. My grandfather found this single scroll in a cave near our home in Antonia, Turkey. Grandfather sold the artifacts to a very young man. Grandpa kept the scroll for himself. We have spent years studying the secrets it holds. There's one more paper I want you to see. Voltairion chose an old piece of paper from a file, looked at it, then handed it to Hans. Hans started to feel his hands shake as he read the telegram. He had heard about this telegram, but never thought he would actually see it for himself. Western Union, Chicago, Hans Schroeder, December 21st, 1897. Boston. The recipient's name was unreadable. Rare find. Come to Chicago immediately. Hans Schroeder. Voltairion spoke next. This telegram was received by my grandfather before he found his treasure. Somehow our families knew each other in the past. I'm not sure how or why, yet this proves there is a connection. It took me several years to put it all together. We have spent decades studying this scroll and have determined that there are many similarities between this language, Hebrew, Sumerian, and Minoan languages, where each letter has a numeric value and sometimes a sound frequency or musical value. Through my research, I believe that this medallion is a linguistic and maybe a historical record of a separate civilization in a separate time. Look at the position of the planets. This specifies a time in history and maybe a specific dimension. The writing is some sort of map that indicates a way of opening paths to different dimensions where these times and civilizations may still exist. Speaking to a stunned Hans, Voltairion started to repack his notes and scroll. Our eyes are two-dimensional, yet our minds see in three dimensions. What is the difference between them? Why are we afraid of a cemetery? It's a proven fact that we have only used 5% of our brain. What's the other 95% for? If we use 5% of our brain, does that mean we only use 5% of our mind as well? Have you ever wondered what is on the other side? If we could get there with just a thought. Hans watched as Voltairion continued. The pentagram is a five-sided object that is symbolic of the 5 different stages of human existence. There are 5 senses, 5 fingers and toes, 5 words of Christ as he was crucified. The Muslims pray 5 times a day. 5 aspects of our world: earth, air, water, fire, and spirit. Also, there are 5 parts to a person: 1 head, 2 arms, 2 legs. Before closing the scroll, he opened it a little further to a design of a strange object with something in the middle that resembles the pentagram he was talking about. Looking deep into Hans's eyes, he said, "It is not the pentagram we are looking for, but what is in the pentagram that we want. Look close at the talisman, and you will see something in the center of the object." Hans watched as he put the book, the Testament of Solomon, in his hands and opened it to a specific page, showing a diagram of the ring Solomon used to control the demons. He opened the scroll farther and showed Hans the same described writing on one of the medallions, and then he went back to the diagram in the book. Hans looked closer at the images on the medallions and saw that one had a necklace while the other one did not. Hans was stunned at the news he had just heard. Voltairion packed his notes and books and followed Hans to the car rental office.